discuss Schiller, chapter 8, the labor market. Labor market is fundamentally not different from other products, meaning there is the equilibrium wage and the quantity of labor exchanged in the market is essentially follows other products, which is the supply and demand. With a slight difference, and the difference is because human capacity to work is limited. So let's look at the labor market, quantity of labor, and this could be measured in hours, weeks. Sometimes you may pay people based on fraction of hours they work, etc. It doesn't matter how we measure it, but fundamentally that's how you measure the quantity of labor. The vertical axis measures the price of labor, or we'll call it wages. And now on the supply side, of course, if I pay you zero, you would not work at all, but as I pay you higher wages, you bring more of your time and talent to the marketplace, and therefore you have, like any other product, upward sloping supply curve for your labor. However, it is possible that once you hit a certain number of hours per day or hours per week, let's say you've already worked 60 hours this week, and you're physically not capable of working, so therefore this is the wage you charge and this is how many hours you work. But should I offer you higher wages, it is possible that you actually will decide to work less hours, maybe at let's say $15 an hour. You work up to 60 hours, but if I paid you $25 an hour, you may decide that 40 hours is all you need to meet your expenses. So therefore, supply of labor could be at certain wages and above, what we call backward bending. Bending supply of labor. That's just, unique to the human capacity to work, and also the positive wage increases could be. So if you have, let's say, a family of two spouses, and one of them gets a big raise or a new job with significant higher pay, it's possible that one of them will decide. So if both of them combine and offer 80 hours per week, and one of them gets a significant wage increase or a new promotion, then it is possible that one of them may work part-time, so combined now work 60. So if this was a labor supply of a family, then you can easily see that the wage increases by one member or two will reduce the overall availability to the market. Now that's the supply side of labor. On the demand side for labor, the employers who are in the market for your time and talent, obviously, as like any other product, if this is a quantity of labor and this is wage, if you're asking for higher wages, then your potential employer will hire less of you than if you agree to accept lower wages, and then they may actually hire you for more hours per week. So the labor demand is, like any other product, downward sloping. Now, we had in earlier discussions, we had talked about the law of diminishing returns. And this law essentially was a very profound law on the supply side of economic thinking, which essentially says that as more input, particularly variable input, is employed, they become less effective. Meaning that the resources you hire over time will lose their potency to deliver. And so with that in mind, we showed that how if, let's say, labor was the input and we measured its impact on the production or output, we realized that as you added more headcounts, their contribution shrank and so forth. So you have this phenomena that the rate of growth in output will shrink or diminishes as you add more inputs of, let's say, labor into the production. So this is the law of diminishing returns, which means that at a certain point you stop hiring workers and employ machinery to mix with the workers, because workers are now fizzling out in their ability to work, so to become productive. So if you do that, then this would be labor with no tools. This would be labor productivity with tools, or newer tools, or more advanced tools, and so therefore everybody becomes more productive. That's the idea there. But nonetheless, what it means is that this change in the output as you change the input, change in output as you change labor, is called marginal physical product of labor. Marginal physical product of labor. This is how physically labor contributes to the production as you add one more. That's where marginal means, one more unit of labor. The marginal physical product of labor is changing the output as you change input, in this case labor, by 1 unit, and this will decline as more labor is used. So therefore, if I am an employer, I know that longer you work, more tired you will be, and therefore you will not be as attentive and productive and so forth. Then if I am thinking of hiring you, this is quantity of labor, and this would be wages. As I hire more of you, I know your productivity declines, and so the only way I can keep you employed is that if you agree to accept lower wages as you work longer hours. Or if you thought of it in terms of number of people you work, the first few people are very productive, in this case up here. The first few people are making significant contribution, but then subsequent headcounts are making smaller and smaller contributions. So when you think about it, you pay the first few people high wages, but then the next batch of workers you hire, they're less productive, so you pay them less wages, and then next batch is in fact even less effective in overall contribution to your production. So this process continues and so forth and so on. So therefore, this demand for labor is a function of marginal physical product of labor, meaning as productivity of additional headcount declines, then the only way you can hire them is that if they agree to compensate you by accepting lower wages. So therefore, for a firm to hire, and I'm specifically looking at figure 8.4, so this is on the this is quantity of labor, this is wages. Let's say in the market, wage is already established, so $6 an hour. People are willing to offer labor at $6 an hour. This is a wage rate. The question is, how many do you hire? Well, As long as wages are above $6, you hire smaller number of people. Okay. As the wages drop, you hire more and more. So therefore, your demand for labor continues to fall until it hits wage rate. And then beyond that, if you're to hire, the wages must also fall. Now, in this context, how much labor you hire is a function of how much they're contributing to your bottom line. So for that, we want to consider the term marginal revenue product. What does that mean? It means that a higher worker, he or she will have contribution to the output. We said that is measured by marginal physical product of labor. So I hire someone, they produce, let's say, 50 pairs of shoes. Therefore, physical contribution is this one additional worker to the overall production is 50 new additional pairs of shoes that she produced. Now take this 50 pairs and multiply it by the price of shoes, pair of shoes, and let's say I'll sell them for $50 a pair. So in terms of revenue contribution, now this person has contributed $2,500. That is called marginal revenue product of labor. Produced 50, I sold it for 50 pairs, I sold it for $50 a pair, so her contribution today is $2,500. So therefore, my demand for her labor is a function of the contribution to the bottom line. But in the backdrop, she becomes increasingly less productive. So therefore, as long as her contribution is above the wage, my demand will continue to grow in this direction. If, for whatever reason, what I have to pay her is less than what she contributes, then I may not have a market for it. So this might be equilibrium. Now, should she become more productive, meaning that for whatever reason she has gone back to school or gained some new skills, or I have combined her with a new machinery and so forth, her marginal physical product is going up. She's now making 60 pairs per day. In that case, at whatever the wage, I'm willing to hire more of her. And by the same token, if she has problems, emotional problems, physical problems, she can only give me now 30 pairs, means that her marginal physical product has declined. And if that's the case, in absence of other laws and regulations, I will cut back on my demand for her labor. So therefore, the demand for labor is a function of two things. One is productivity, and the second one is the price that I can fetch for whatever that individual contributes. In the real world, as we all know, because of globalization, prices that I used to get are falling because competition is entering. I can, whatever I used to produce and sell for $50, now there are cheaper imports, and therefore maybe $25 is the best I can get for the product. And this marginal productivity either stay the same, or the worker is getting tired and aged and so forth. The productivity is also falling. So maybe really over time, this person, due to aging and whatever, and are no new technologies that I can throw into the mix, the overall productivity is down to 35, and I can get only $25 for it. So you can easily see that the marginal revenue product, if you multiply these two numbers, will be definitely less than the $2,500 contribution she made to the financial conditions or well-being of the firm. And so, therefore, at this point, either she has to accept lower wages in order to compensate for lower productivity and also lower market price for what she does, or I have no choice but to switch her to someone who's either more productive, younger, healthier, more educated, whatever that takes, in order to make up the difference. And if that's not even sufficient to make me survive, then I have to move operations entirely to another part of the country or the world in order to reduce wages so that my margin revenue product will go back to become a positive number relative to the wage and benefits and so forth. So that's why a lot of jobs in recent decades have moved elsewhere due to globalization because of the falling prices and stagnant productivity change. So like you find like furniture and shoes and clothing and so forth and so on have moved elsewhere for that reason. Now let's now move on to some of the other ideas here related. One is the minimum wage. Impact. So you have a labor market. There's a demand for labor and supply of labor. This would be equilibrium wage, and this would be equilibrium employment. Now, should we set the minimum wage, and this is, let's say, for those workers who are in the minimum wage market, it's not for professionals and so forth, but should we set the minimum wage? Let's say the minimum wage is $6.50 and we raise it to $7.50. In that situation, those who were in the market to hire minimum wage workers find this unattractive price and therefore they cut back on demand. At the same time, people who were not in the labor market at all at 650, but 750 at least helps them to have a living wage, let's say, they start showing up looking for work. So the supply will increase. This would be the quantity supplied, and this would be the quantity demanded for labor. And the difference would be the excess supply. So twofold. One is that some people lose their jobs because when minimum wage went up and are replaced by machines or migrant workers, or entirely the job has been shipped out of the marketplace. And then there's additional component that makes up this unemployment rank, are those who are seeking employment at a higher wage and are unable to find. So that's one sort of uh, policy implication you can use this market to understand. Another policy implication is related to the impact of unions. So let's look at the market. This is a quantity of labor. This is unionized market. Wages. There's a demand and supply. This would be equilibrium wage in the absence of union. However, unions tend to demand higher wages. In that case, because they can flex muscle, in that case, the firm will say, all right, I pay the higher wages, but I will hire less of you. So it has to let some people go. So that these are the people who would lose their jobs under unionized environments. Then at the higher wages, you would think that more people want to work for unionized firms that the firm is willing to hire. Now, people who cannot find job, because these people who lose their employment due to unionized wage as opposed to equilibrium wage, go to non-unionized markets, quantity of labor, non-union market. And there is a demand and supply in that market. And therefore, those who lose their jobs in this market will flood the other. And so this would be the supply of labor one, which would tend to depress wages further in non-unionized environments. So these are some things to consider, and that pretty much concludes the discussion on the on chapter 8. Now I want to pause here. You may want to stop this video and then go through both questions for discussions at the end of the chapter, and then a couple problems I've assigned before you review the rest of this recording to test yourself and make sure you understand the material. Pause here if you want. So I will continue now. Just quickly on some of the questions for discussion. Number one, why are you doing this homework? Well, you do this homework to improve your productivity through skill and education. So you're really after improving your marginal physical product of labor if you're educated as opposed to non-educated, which hopefully when you're employed, whatever you do will contribute more to the marginal revenue product of labor because you're more skilled. What do you expect to gain? Of course, if your productivity goes up, so the demand for your labor will increase. So you're hoping that if this would be at current wages, would be how much your organization is willing to hire you. Once you become educated, then your marginal physical product will rise, and then at whatever wage you used to be asking for, your employer is willing to hire more of you. And that's really the essence of getting the education. If homework performance determined course grade, would you spend more time doing it? And of course, if homework performance will produce more results, then obviously you spend more time doing it. Question number two, why does the opportunity cost of doing homework increases as you spend more time doing it? Well, as you spend more time doing homework, you get slowly exhausted and your productivity begins to decline and so forth. So that's why you have, let's say, hours. Input is hours doing homework. And this is output would be grade. As you spend more hours, the contribution to your grade will shrink. And so therefore, as that happens, it reaches a point that maybe additional time will not produce better results in this arena, and you're giving up doing other things where you can be actually more effective. Therefore, the opportunity cost associated with putting too much time into doing homework will increase because you're not getting anything in return for it, which is a higher grade, because you've already maxed out, you're doing B plus A and whatever, and so waste of time doing homework at this point costs you more in terms of leisure or maybe working and earning some money. So that's really the idea there. Question number three, how does supply and demand explain the wage gap between engineers and sociology majors? Well, the fact is that engineers in the marketplace are producing more value for their employers, and therefore the demand for engineers, if this is supply of labor, demand for engineers is here, demand for sociologists is here. So that's why the wage for engineers is higher than wage for sociologists. Okay? So that's essentially is tied to the productivity or value that the workplace puts on individuals. Now, this could be subjective. Sometimes a psychologist is incredibly important, but again, we are thinking of these things in a limited context. We may be wrong to not pay some people better wages. For example, teachers fetch lower wages because the assumption is that the teacher helps to produce an elementary school graduate or a middle school graduate or high school graduate, and they can, of course, the elementary and middle school graduates don't actually earn anything. High school graduate earns maybe 10, 12 bucks an hour, and therefore, therefore, if you think of the productivity of a school teacher in that very narrow sense, all they do is just help to produce workers who can make 10, $12 an hour, and therefore you pay them accordingly. A college professor will produce an engineer or a scientist, and those engineers and scientists can earn more, and therefore college professors are paid more. College professors in the School of Business or Engineering are paid more than college professors in the School of Humanities and so forth, just because the graduates, which is the output of their efforts, are priced lower in the marketplace. So that's really sort of a long answer to this discussion. And question number, let me just skip here. Under what conditions might an increase? This is number 5. Might an increase in minimum wage not reduce the number of low wage jobs? So if minimum wage can increase, but then the productivity can also increase. For instance, if McDonald's is forced to pay more for its employees who usually are minimum wage people, but McDonald's comes up with automation in the kitchen, like sodas get filled by machine through a computer that decides what soda and what size cup, and I've seen this particular machine just looking window, then they can actually avoid laying off minimum wage workers if they're paying them more, just because they figured out to make them more productive through automation and so forth. Number 6, the United Farm Workers want strawberry pickers to join their union. They hope then to convince consumers to buy only union strawberries. For such activities raise picker wages. Yeah, if they become unionized, they can demand, because this basically bond together, and they say that you either hire us collectively or nobody will work for you. So the employer in the short run is stuck with it and will pay the higher wages. What else might help? Well, if they become more productive through more automation or maybe and so forth and so on. So now let's I think in question 8 I have answered earlier, said why engineer professors paid more than English professors, just because the margin revenue product, what they produce at the end of the day, which is the graduates of the department, are priced higher and lower. That's really the essence of that. Both are perfect and fantastic professors, but what the market is willing to pay for their output, which is their graduates, is different, and therefore the pay is different. Now going to problems, problem number 5, page 181. In figure 8.7, so if you go back to figure 8.7 on page 176, how many workers lose their jobs when the minimum wage is enacted? So essentially, if you look at that graph, let me actually put it up here for you to see. When minimum wage is enacted, the QE minus QD, this distance is the number of people who lose their jobs. And part B, how many workers are unemployed at the minimum wage? Well, the difference would be between quantity supplied and quantity demanded, because higher minimum wage has attracted new players, new workers, and they are now declaring themselves as unemployed. So therefore, overall unemployment will look bigger numbers, because people who were not in the market in the past are now seeking employment. And part C, what accounts for the difference between answer A and B? A was the number of people lost their jobs as the minimum wage went up, so the demand shrunk. However, this higher minimum wage attracted new. So difference between answer to A and B is the fact that new players are entering into this market, labor market, and offer more of their wages. And then the next exercise that I asked you to look at is number 6 on the same page. What is the marginal revenue product of Alabama football coach according to headline news? Well, on page 173, the new coach has managed to bring in millions of dollars. I think 39 million profit that may be attributable to the hiring of this coach. It's not a good thing to really think of it in that sense, because maybe he got lucky and drafted better players at the same time, etc. In college football, the players are not really compensated for their contribution to the output. So maybe some of these coaches are collecting significant wages because they managed to have a winning team, and therefore a lot of people are contributing. But this leads to a whole discussion of, should we pay, let's say, corporate executives in this country massive salaries and compensation bonuses and so forth, where their counterparts in other parts of the world, like Japan, who are just as intelligent and as creative and innovative, receive a fraction of it. So where is the justice? And how is that a CEO of Samsung or Toyota makes no more than $1 million or $2 million, and the CEO of a General Motors, for example, or Chrysler, sometimes they make several $1 million or in tens of millions of dollars for compensation. So this debate has been around for quite some time, which means that sometimes it is in defiance of the marginal revenue product sort of model. That some people somehow are not producing goods that are selling well, but in the scheme of things, and maybe some traditional arrangements that has been around for some time, they can demand significantly higher compensation than their counterparts if they were to compete globally. So this will wrap up the discussion here for chapter 8.